If you have trauma in your past and you feel a deep sense of distrust for people, it's because betrayal trauma is woven into CPTSD. This is Dr. Spencer Coaches. Today I'm going to talk to you about the connection between betrayal trauma and CPTSD. If you know what CPTSD is, it's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's because there's multiple incidences of trauma versus PTSD, which is one incident. So CPTSD primarily happens during childhood from abusive parents or abusive teachers, narcissistic parents, sexual abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse, and it happens for years. And it causes the brain to develop differently, where you're basically stuck in your flight, fight, freeze, or fawn response your entire life. And the treatment of it takes decades. And for me, this is what I experienced. Is I was tortured when I was younger, 4 and 5 years old. No one believed me. Nobody had any support for me, my parents, you know what I mean? And then I tried to commit suicide when I was 19, and that launched me into my healing journey, going to a psychiatrist and studying psychology, going to a Zen monastery, living in a yoga ashram, and getting into life coaching. Went through the Landmark Forum, and then got hypnotherapy. So all of these things helped me on my healing journey. The practice of meditation and yoga is really what helps me the most with my emotional intelligence and being able to process these painful feelings and come to a sense of completion and inner peace. And that's what enabled me to do that. Now, the other trauma that comes side by side with CPTSD is betrayal trauma. And the reason why that is, see, I have a video on CPTSD already. You can, I think it's going to be 2 videos back. You can watch that. And I just made a video on betrayal trauma, so you can watch that. And in this video, I'm going to make the connection between the two, because whoever's abusing you, it's usually someone close to you, trusted teacher, parent, someone like that, family member. And your expectation of them, especially as a child, where, you expect them to protect you, to nurture you, to cultivate confidence and self-trust in you, suddenly is violated. And that expectation is completely turned upside down. How could this person be doing this to me? For me, it was my teachers. And then my parents, who just didn't stand by me. They took the teacher's side. And how can my parents do this to me and treat me like this? So there's a deep sense of betrayal, a betrayal of expectation. But it's not just an expectation. Every child should be protected, nurtured, and their self-worth cultivated. And oftentimes it's not, especially by narcissistic parents, where they're overly criticized, you're put down all the time, told you can never measure up. Or if you're being beaten, it's like, why is my caretaker suddenly turning on me and beating me? There's a betrayal. And that betrayal trauma is really what's causing your pain. I mean, there is physical trauma. There's the psychological trauma. There is the emotional dysregulation. I talked about that in my CPTSD video. And all of that comes with the territory. The lack of trust, the sense of abandonment, the shame, the anger, the guilt, the rage, the fear. And underneath that is the despair, the agony, the terror. And the betrayal, it's the it's the disappointment. It's the shame and guilt, really. And that is the abandonment. Because when you're betrayed as a child, you feel abandoned. And that abandonment triggers the flight or fight response as well. So you have these multiple factors triggering you, these multiple factors causing you to get stuck in the flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. I'll talk about the flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. We're familiar with the fight or flight. If you fight, you're going to get angry, you're going to argue back with your parents, you're going to stand up for yourself. The extreme of that is you turn into a bully and turn into a jerk or a narcissist. The flight response, you run away from everything. So you avoid all kinds of circumstance and challenges in life. You avoid people. You become very ambiguous. You never, you actually avoid interacting with people. You become a loner. You don't call people back. That's a way of protecting yourself. It's a way of making yourself feel safe. The other one is the freeze response, where you just shut down emotionally. You go into analysis paralysis. You go into stoicism. And you kind of just read social cues and just kind of go along with the program. The other side, and now that's where the deep sense of abandonment and shame and guilt come in with the freeze response, because you're avoiding feeling those emotions. So you don't process them. And then your whole life is this sense of, well, you're kind of this unemotional person, lacking empathy for people, and don't get along with people very well. And maybe you're not argumentative. That would be the fight response. That'd be narcissist. But there is a borderline personality disorder outcome of CPTSD. So extreme emotional dysregulation, flipping out on people, then crying in depression, wanting to kill yourself, and then going into extreme happiness and joy. And it's that roller coaster ride of emotions. And unstable identity. You may switch your identity around just to say, this is who I am now. And it's just an emotional reaction. You're just channeling these emotions in the form of behavior and expression that's not very constructive for living. The fawn response is you become a people pleaser. This often coincides the freezing response. And because how do you appease your abuser? You give them what they want. You become compliant and obedient. This is shown in the movie Mommy Dearest. The mother was a narcissistic mother, and she had twin daughters. The one of the twin daughters was completely compliant, did everything the mother said. The other daughter was just herself, didn't know why she was being punished for doing the things she did. Her mother would berate her with criticism and beat her with wire coat hangers and things. Just pure classic narcissistic mother. And the one that got along was just a people pleaser. And you basically, you do that to appease the abuser. So as long as you give them what they want, tell them what they want, they'll back off on the abuse. It's an adaptive response. So you go along in life just kissing ass, so to speak. And people see through that, so they distrust you. They think you're just saying things to get along, and you don't really have a true value system that you stand for. And you're always the last one to know about the parties and the social gatherings. You're not disinvited, but you're only invited when you find out, and they don't want to not include you, so they invite you at the very end. That's commonplace with people pleasers. So these are the responses that's an outcome of CPTSD, and the betrayal kicks in because you figure out a way to survive the betrayal. First there's a denial. There's a shock at first. It's like, oh my God, what happened? Then there's a denial. And then there's an obsession. You're like, what the heck just happened? And this could last for months. You're ruminating on it, just constantly dwelling on what happened, why did it happen? And then you go into basically the coming to terms with it in the sense of you figure out a way to adapt to it. You justify it. And that's when you resign to a survival tactic. You get very angry. That's the next step. You get upset, and anger, again, is taking action. You're fighting. So you figure out a way to deal with it. And then you resign yourself to that survival strategy, and you think, this is who I am. See, the same thing happens with CPTSD. If you notice, the pattern is very similar in the response in how you survive. Because what happens is if you've developed a sense of resilience, and some people, why do some kids have trauma in their childhood and they grow up just fine? And they're like, well, I don't know. Well, yeah, my dad used to hit me with a belt, but I thought of it as discipline, and it taught me to behave properly. I don't have a problem with that. Well, other people, my father beat me with a belt. I can't stand, I don't even want to look at a belt. And other people get triggered. It's because of your resilience. And everybody's just built differently and hardwired differently, where some people are more resilient than others. So you may experience this sense of you believe to be resilient because you think you got your life together, but actually, you've developed a behavioral pattern that keeps people away from you, that you become aloof and ambiguous. You avoid people. You don't follow through with commitments. Maybe everything was fine until you got married, and then the woman you married reminds you of your mother. Very critical, very demanding, overbearing, always yelling and screaming at you, and you can't take it anymore, and you wind up cheating on her. Whatever the reason is, there's something that happens later on in life that causes you to introspect again. And you realize, wow, this stuff did happen to me. I never thought of anything, like it's a big deal. But I never realized that I'm actually just living to survive. And that's commonplace with CPTSD. The betrayal, the sense of your worldview being completely shattered. If someone's beating you, that's what happened to me. I was being tortured. They're electrocuting me, suffocating me, drowning me, raping me, beating me. I was just 5 years old. It's like, what are these people doing? My whole sense of what are human beings about? When I grew up, I never had any respect for teachers and authority, because teachers and authority represented to me, you're nothing but abusers. So for me, it's like I wanted to stand up for myself. I was a fighter, and I just mouth off to people all the time. I was known as a wise. I mean, I'd say funny things too. I'd entertain people by what I said. I was witty, but teachers didn't find it amusing. The other kids found it amusing, but that's the way I dealt with it. And I was like that my whole life until I realized this as a doctor, this is not a good way of being with patients. I mean, I did adjust my whole personality after graduating school. It's actually after my first job. I mean, it made me grow up and consider, what integrity and accountability really means. And developed a sense of professionalism. But underneath it, I still had the same emotional pattern going on. And I wanted to be my teenage adolescent self again. It's instant gratification, my impulsivity. I was very impulsive growing up. This is common with CPTSD, you become impulsive. Common with borderline personality disorder. Common with narcissistic personality disorder. And with betrayal, it's the justification. I am the way I am because this is what I had to do to survive. So don't you question me. Don't you tell me what to do. This is who I am. And there's a whole identity woven around surviving because you overcame through justification of the betrayal. You created rules for yourself to how to fulfill your needs, your need for significance, your need for comfort, your need for growth, your need for belonging. How did you form relationships? What kind of games did you play to create relationships? And why aren't they working out? Because people see through those games. And then they start to see you as untrustworthy because you keep flipping out or you keep switcheroo on people and not following through with commitments and obligations. And people look at you as they may try to talk to you about it, and you may have the survival pattern of I'm going to deflect and avoid. So you may just not respond because you're frozen. You may just not return a call. You may just drop these friends and say it's all their fault and justify it by everybody's a backstabber, no one's on my side, I can't trust anybody, and justify the whole experience. That's the betrayal trauma woven in with the CPTSD. And that's why it's really hard to heal from CPTSD because of the betrayal. And I think this is underlooked in psychological treatment. The successful treatment of CPTSD involves not only cognitive therapy, but it also involves somatic therapy. Because of the emotional dysregulation, you need to develop emotional intelligence, which means getting grounded in your body, which is what somatic therapy does. It's part of my program. And how you do that is for me, it's meditation, specifically Vipassana meditation, which is Buddhist meditation, which actually focuses on the sensations in the body. It's an in-body experience. And you develop a tolerance. Just whatever you feel, you just let yourself feel. You don't judge it. You don't label it. You don't analyze it, turn it into something it's not. It's just a feeling. It's just a sensation in the body. Is it hot or cold? Is it wet or dry? Does it move or does it stay in one place? Does it feel hard or soft? And the qualities of sensations, you can name those to neutralize the story around the emotion. Because we take our emotions and develop a whole story around it, which then amplifies the emotion, turns that little irritation into rage, turns a sense of disappointment into a deep sense of sadness and depression, turns this sense of nervousness into this big panic attack. So that's how our mind will amplify certain negative emotions and turn them against us. And we express these in behavioral patterns that are not constructive or conducive towards a successful outcome, whether it's your career, or a relationship. And that's the real challenge in treating CPTSD because of the betrayal trauma. The betrayal trauma has to be looked at when you're treating CPTSD. So if you know you have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, you know you're suffering from this, understand that betrayal trauma is woven into it. It's almost hard to distinguish. But that sense of your worldview, your sense of safety, your sense of trust in the people that are supposed to take care of you is completely shattered. And it's the shattering of that trust that needs to be healed. You forgive, but don't forget. And as you get older, you're wiser, hopefully, and you have more cognitive development and more maturity. So you understand that these emotions are of your past, that no one's causing you this. They're just simply memories of the past that get triggered and amplified within the circumstance, your current circumstance that you're in, that you may project onto the people or onto the situation and want to point fingers at them when in fact it's just your own emotional reaction from your past that you've never fully processed. And that's why the somatic therapy is really important, to allow you to process those emotions. The feeling of sadness, aloneness, and abandonment and shame. That's the betrayal trauma. And that's why you don't trust people. That's why you keep people at arm's distance. That's why you don't really create true commitments with people. And why you're so wishy-washy. Why you can't stay in one place for very long. Because of the instability of the emotions. Because you don't trust people. And there's more to it. I'm trying to summarize all of that here. I mean, if you have any of these problems, leave a comment below so I can understand what you're going through and we can create a conversation. So as I'm a trauma-informed life coach, I'm also a business coach, and I often find that trauma and business people go hand in hand. There's a lot of people with trauma, more than you think. And how it affects your ability to lead, how it affects your ability to relate to others, customers, clients, family members, it greatly impacts that. And you become ineffective as an employee or as a business person or as a husband or as a wife, as a friend. It impacts all walks of your life. And you may think, well, this is just who I am, and resolve it. It's not who you are. Who you are is what brings you real joy in life, what puts a smile on your face, and also what gives you pride in yourself, in your life. I don't mean arrogant pride like I'm better than people. I mean, what can you truly appreciate about yourself? What can you truly be grateful for in your life? And those values of gratitude, of what you're grateful for, is what's important to you, what really matters to you. And that your value system, that's when you get to your core values. That's who you really are. That's your authentic self. And most of us live to satisfy the expectations of our parents, of our peers, meeting status quo. I want to look good. I want to impress people. You know, we live from that point of view. And that's just surviving. We're not born just to survive. We're born to thrive, to have a fulfilling, enriching, satisfying life, truly satisfying and fulfilling. And how do you find that satisfaction and fulfillment? You can't buy it. It's something that needs to be discovered within you. And you get through all of the emotional baggage, all of the trauma, all of the betrayal, all of the abandonment, all of the shame, all of the guilt, the rage, the despair, the agony. When you get through that, you got to dig through those layers of the onion to get to the gold inside. And that's your true self, because you're truly a being of love and light. You're truly a being who matters, who wants to contribute to the world. And all this negativity just built up due to the circumstances and situations you're in. And no one ever taught you how to process these emotions. I can teach you how to process these emotions so you can move on and experience what life was truly meant to be. If you have any questions, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below so we can create a dialogue, and then I can get to know what your situation is to see if I can help you. This is Dr. Spencer Coaches. Thank you so much for listening.